back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. You got Big Baby Stef here. You got A-Lot13. Alex Lott, the fantasy phenom, rocking with me today. And it is officially redraft season. We are in July. We are 2 months away from week one. Let that sink in. 2 months away from week one of the NFL season. Drafts are coming at us fast. We'll hop back on the dynasty train later on. But for now, we need to get into some of these redraft takes because there's some players today that situations make them really appealing in redraft, even though I want nothing to do with them in dynasty leagues. Alex, you ready to jump into some of the ADPs and some of these player values?
Yeah, this is fun. I think every year we get around July, August, a lot of the more casual players or even really intense fantasy football redraft players that don't play dynasty, it can take a minute to catch up, to recalibrate with the offseason moves. Sometimes it's really shocking to look at the ADP for the first time in July or August and say, holy smokes, I can't believe that guy's going that high or going that low. So we're going to start to craft some of these takes around which players are going too high, which players are going too low. We're going to talk about some players that have switched teams. There's also a lot of guys that are being left for dead after a bad season in 2021. So it's going to be fun to start our redraft takes today. More mock drafts are coming as well. And let's keep that Discord moving. We've had a lot of redraft questions that have started to pop up in the Discord. It's free in the link below to join, to talk with us, talk with our community. But Steph, before we get going, I just have to let the people know how committed I am today. I live in Tampa, Florida. It is the middle of the summer, and I woke up this morning with no air conditioning in my house. So I am basically recording this from a sauna today. So if you see me sweating, not only does it mean that my takes are just that hot, but it also means like I'm literally 100 degrees, 120 degrees right now in Florida.
Good God. And yeah, I can't believe you're wearing gray right now. That's a bold
Just
move.
have to show the commitment,
I'm scared of these takes that you're going to drop.
The ice water's on tap.
Let's start today's redraft takes. Oh, it feels so good to be back.
Yes.
Let's talk about the first round. Let's start it at the top of draft boards. Dalvin Cook right now on Underdog. Everything we're going to talk about today is Underdog, ADP. We just find that it's the most active drafts that are going on. Sometimes the format favors certain players compared to others. But Dalvin Cook right now is falling to the back of the first round consistently with ADP 10th overall, which based on past years is an extreme value because Dalvin Cook's been a lock for top 5, if not top 4, the last 3 seasons. So how are you treating Dalvin Cook and really the whole first round this year?
The first round this year is very different for me because I think there's actually more wide receivers with a case to go in that first round. And I've been doing a ton of these Underdog drafts. I've been trying to craft my rosters in different ways. And that's why I love Best Ball. It's a $5 entry and it's just fun draft practice. And then you might hit big at the end of the year and get a lot of that money back. So for me, I've tried to craft my roster in every which way. I've drafted from just about every spot in the first round. And you do have this tier at the top of wide receivers. Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson are consistently going in the top 5. The other 2 in there are CMC and Jonathan Taylor. And after that, it really is this murky tier at the running back spot. You mentioned Dalvin Cook. There's also Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, and Najee Harris. And then there's Stephon Diggs and Devontae Adams, even CeeDee Lamb creeping into the first round sometimes. Travis Kelce is there as well. And to me, if I have one of those top 5 picks, I think that top 5 tier is locked. Like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, I would take at the top because their upside is just far and away above some of the other receivers. And then CMC, we don't need to talk about him. If he stays healthy, he's going to smash. And obviously Jonathan Taylor. But past that, it does get really tough. And I would almost rather just draft from the 10 spot. I typically hate drafting from the turn. But when I'm looking at round 1, I'd rather draft from the 11 or 12 spot and snag 2 of these guys or pair, Dalvin Cook with a Joe Mixon early in round 2 or maybe go with Travis Kelce early and pair him with a DeAndre Swift, then have to pick at that 5 spot, reach on maybe you still get Dalvin Cook there, maybe you take Derrick Henry, but then the tier of guys you're looking at in mid-round 2 does drop off. You're looking at more of the Deebo Samuel, the Saquon Barkley, the Mark Andrews range. So for me, there's a lot that's going to be decided in the back of the first round. And if we're going to talk Dalvin Cook specifically, I found myself really fading him in the first this year, and there's no reason to do so. I think it's just a perception thing. As we get into some of these redraft leagues that are these real leagues where we're making start-sit decisions, we're making trades throughout the season, I think I need to come around on Dalvin because for the past several years, getting him outside the top 5 has been a bargain. And on the field, he's showed no reason for us to think he's going to slow down. When he's healthy, he is a top 5 running back. There are the rumors that the Vikings are going to be more pass happy this year. That's, to me, just a common offseason narrative. Maybe they throw it a little bit more, but Dalvin Cook is a good pass catcher as well, so that could actually help him in these PPR leagues. But I've found myself fading Dalvin Cook, and I'm starting to really feel guilty about it, and I feel like I shouldn't be. So there's some due diligence for me in the next couple months just to say, hey, maybe there's these perceptions we have from last season that we need to put aside to get our minds clear in these drafts and actually take these values when they present themselves. Because there's a lot of other guys like Dalvin Cook that we'll talk about that are being faded by the community that still have juice left. And just because they're older players doesn't mean that they're going to be left for dead in 2022.
After those top-tier receivers, right, the big 3, Jefferson, Kupp, Chase, I'm fine to circle back and take best running back that's there, whether it is Najee, whether it is Dalvin. I don't understand why we're suddenly putting Najee Harris like firmly over Dalvin Cook in some of these ADPs that I'm seeing. I'm taking Dalvin above Najee Harris because it's going to be a better offense. It's going to be a high-flying offense. They brought in the Rams, former OC, to be the head coach, and Kevin O'Connell should keep this team moving with high pace of play. And Dalvin Cook's been phenomenal. Top 10 running back in fantasy points per game the last 3 seasons. He's pretty much a lock for 250-plus carries and 50-plus targets if healthy. That's his floor to me, health permitting. The only thing we've really seen decline from Dalvin as he's aged is that the pass-catching work has slowly dropped off over the last 3 years. Maybe, just maybe, we see Kevin O'Connell employ this Rams offense that doesn't throw to the running back too much. Maybe we see Dalvin's target share drop a little bit, right? Maybe that decline continues, but it's going to be incremental. I can't believe that they're going to move away from a stud fixture in Minnesota who's been this workhorse 3-down back. And what we have seen from the Rams system that Kevin O'Connell's bringing over is a workhorse running back, and that's exactly what Dalvin Cook profiles to be. So I'm still very in on Dalvin. I think he's firmly in the top 5 running backs. I'm taking him over Derrick Henry. I'm taking him over Najee Harris. I think it's kind of people have gotten tired of the same old from Dalvin Cook because he's been so consistent, been such a good producer, and we see that from guys who are kind of these boring fixtures like Ezekiel Elliott last year, who was getting criminally slept on in redraft. And Dalvin Cook, I think, is falling into that boat this season, at least based on current drafts happening in July.
And Dalvin Cook was still good last year. RB9 in points per game of running backs that played over 50% of games. And the real drop-off for him was just the touchdowns. And we saw in 2019, he had 13 total touchdowns, 2020, 17 total touchdowns. Last year, that went down to 6. So I think that is an outlier season. And Dalvin Cook, if he even gets back to that 10 touchdown range, he doesn't have to get back to the 17 touchdown season. If he gets back to 10 touchdowns, there are rumors. I mentioned the pass happy offense rumors, but there are also rumors. I've just been reading up on it a little bit while you were talking. And with that, there is an expectation that Dalvin Cook could see more targets as well. So that makes sense. You know, pass more, running back gets more targets. So if the touchdowns get back up to 10, the targets come up by a target or 2 per game more than they were last season, and he can play 13, 14 games. There's no reason to believe Dalvin Cook can't finish as a top 5 running back again in 2022.
No joke. Right now on Player News, on Fantasy Pros, the top blurb is Dalvin Cook expected to see more targets. So we're in that period where everyone wants to look with rose-colored glasses. We're seeing that happen with DJ Moore now and the Baker Mayfield trade bomb that just hit us. We're getting July, just continuing the greatest offseason of all time in the NFL. We're seeing a Baker Mayfield trade at the beginning of July, just weeks away from camp. You can't make this stuff up. But Alex, let's keep it rolling. Let's stay in the division with the Vikings, Bears, Lions, and the Packers, because we need to talk about Allen Lazard and this Green Bay passing game. Allen Lazard, to me, is criminally undervalued right now. Going off the board, wide receiver 41. Wide receiver 44 is where he finished last year in fantasy points per game. So you take Devontae Adams out of the offense, and no one's expecting Allen Lazard to take a big jump up. And what blew my mind even more, looking at this ADP, is that shout out to our boy Deep Dive Fantasy Football on Twitter. He put out a poll. I was posting in our Discord channel. It just said which Packer leads the team in receptions. The majority had Alan Lazard at 45.6% of the total vote. Aaron Jones was second with 33%. So the majority believes that Alan Lazard is going to lead the team in receptions. He's going to be that wide receiver one for Green Bay. Now, is it for the whole season? Do we see a late breakout from Christian Watson as a rookie? You and I see him as a developmental prospect, so we're not too scared. Other guys believe that maybe Sammy Watkins can capture some of his old form. I'm not in on that narrative. I see Sammy Watkins as like a Sterling Shepard, where just he might have some pops, but it's not going to be sustainable for season long at all. He's a waiver name at best. But I want to go down narrative street for a second and talk about Alan Lazard, because I've picked him out of this receiving core and said I'm willing to push my chips in this year, especially at cost, on Alan Lazard, even around above this ADP. I have to believe he finishes as at least a wide receiver 3, a comfortable flex. But Devontae Adams in his second year, 94 targets, only caught 50 of them, so extremely inefficient. I remember early days of Devontae Adams, he was like a laughing stock because he had one of the lowest catch rates. 483 yards, 1 touchdown. Okay, after that season, that second year for Adams, he put up 6 wide receiver 1 seasons in a row and was wide receiver 1 twice. So we look at Lazard last year in year 3, a season best 513 receiving yards, also his healthiest season. He played 11 games in 2019, 10 games in 2020, and in 2021, in 15 games, 4 targets per game. There leaves a lot to be desired from a volume perspective, but how much room for volume can you get when you do have Devontae Adams and you're not this highly touted first-round draft pick, right? You're climbing your way up the depth chart. That's the position Lazard's been in. But the 8 touchdowns last year, I think, is where a lot of the upside could come in, where you don't need him to be a 140-target player. He could just be a double-digit touchdown scoring monster in an efficient Green Bay offense, where if he's the number 1 guy and the receptions are there, if he just takes a small step up, he's going to outproduce this wide receiver 41 ADP. So I'm in on Lazard in the mid-rounds where you're taking some dart throws, especially where you go with some safer options early in the draft, like Keenan Allen, like Mike Evans, and you want to shoot for some shots that could take you over the top at that flex spot. I'm talking about Christian Kirk. I'm talking about Alan Lazard. There's other guys in that range, Kadarius Toney, pick your poison. But the one I'm taking is Alan Lazard every time.
I agree. And I will say his ADP is climbing. Early in the offseason, you would be able to get him 10th, 11th round consistently. Did a draft on Underdog this morning, actually, and he went, I think, in the 8th round. So it was a little bit of a reach versus ADP, but people are coming around, and we could see that one person in your league that's all in on Lazard, go grab him a round or 2 early. So if you want him, you're probably going to have to take him in that 8th round area. But I think when you're talking about a guy you're getting in the 8th round, he's not your 3rd receiver. He's probably your 4th receiver. He's probably someone you're going to think about flexing every now and then. And the best thing about Alan Lazard is the touchdown upside. Lazard isn't a guy that's going to get 100 receptions. He might stretch 1,000 yards if he hits his supreme upside and truly is that volume monster in Green Bay. But even last season, we saw Alan Lazard have 8 touchdowns, and that was on 60 targets. That was with Devontae Adams getting 11 touchdowns of his own. So this season, I wouldn't be surprised if Alan Lazard had a stat line something like, 60 receptions for 850 yards and like 10 or 12 touchdowns. And when you're talking about these flex options, if you're in a 2-flex league, when you get into bye weeks, you want someone that can give you that touchdown upside. And if he has a game for, 4 for 60 and a touchdown, who knows, maybe even 4 for 60 and 2 touchdowns, or in a 100-yard game with a touchdown, he has those big pop week upside, that big pop week upside potential with Aaron Rodgers. And the sample size is pretty small over the past couple seasons without Devontae Adams, because a lot of the games that Devontae Adams missed, ironically, Alan Lazard missed as well. And I'm not going to draw too much from this sample because it is one game. But in the one game over the past 2 seasons that Devontae Adams has missed and Alan Lazard has played, he went for 6 for 146 and a touchdown on 8 targets. So we know the upside is there. And I honestly see Christian Watson coming in. And at best, I think he profiles for that Marquez Valdez-Scantling vacancy that's there, about 4 or 5 targets a game. He's going to stretch the field, really open things up for Aaron Rodgers. But I hate to throw these names out there, but I think Randall Cobb and Sammy Watkins are going to see some targets as well underneath. And no, I'm not necessarily interested in them from a fantasy football perspective, but I think kind of as a group, this Packers wide receiver room could be just a little bit messy. And Lazard is clearly the only one you're going to want at least going into the season. But I'm with you. I think the upside is there. And at cost, I don't see a lot of guys in this range that have probably as high of a floor and as high of a ceiling as Allen Lazard has for the Packers this year.
The competition level isn't that stiff for Lazard either, because we're talking about a guy who profiles as a true outside alpha X receiver, 6'3", 225 pounds, runs a 4.55. I know he was undrafted out of Iowa State, excuse me. But this is one of those project receivers that I think we could see finally coming into his own. I'm not in on the narrative that Aaron Rodgers isn't going to put the ball in a rookie's hands. If Christian Watson is that dude, I think Rodgers will feed him. But you and I are willing to take the bet on the known commodity that has done it consistently in the NFL over a small school, 4-year project receiver. And then Robert Tonyan. People are getting really excited about Robert Tonyan. He hasn't really done much in my eyes. His best season was 586 yards and 11 touchdowns in 16 games. He was on pace to finish way below that last season. He's not an elite tight end yet, and people are lumping Tonyan in with Hawkinson. And people need to stop acting like he's a lock to be a top 8 tight end this year. He's a touchdown or bust streamer at best in redraft. I like him, but I'm not expecting any sort of massive ceiling for Tonyan. Amari Rodgers ran 39 routes last year. No, just no. So it's got to be Lazard.
And yeah, looking at these ADPs, I do want to correct myself from earlier. It does look like you're right. He is going around that 7th, 8th round turn right now.
Here are some of the names from Underdog where Lazard is going behind. So Devonta Smith, Russell Gage, Drake London, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, Hunter Renfrow, Brandon Ayuk. Okay, so those are the names that are going over Lazard. I think he should be higher up in that tier behind Russell Gage, right next to Drake London. Definitely over Hunter
should be ahead of Renfrow. Definitely should be ahead of Ayuk. Probably should be ahead of Michael Thomas as well. And I think the argument's there for DeAndre Hopkins. Honestly, the suspension, it's hard to evaluate that. If it depends on your roster construction, whether you want to take Hopkins there. I personally would probably rather just take the shot on Lazard and get off to a hot start. But yeah, he should be firmly as a wide receiver 3, and right now he's being drafted as a wide receiver 4.
Talked about Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He went from Green Bay to Kansas City. Let's do the same thing and talk about Rojo and this Kansas City run game. Everything about Kansas City this year is fascinating. This is going to be one of the most fun teams to watch as far as the weapons and how they produce on the field, because it's like the group of misfit toys out here in Kansas City. But, Alex, you've been famous or infamous for being in on Rojo prior to the Lenny signing, and you and I have had the debates back and forth, Leonard Fournette versus Ronald Jones. This is one more chance for Rojo to prove himself and be the guy. The thing that you've always hung your hat on with Rojo, and you've really sold me on Rojo and why I'm in on him at his current ADP right now, is because he is a good rusher. He is a good rusher on the ground. He's been efficient. He's broken off big plays consistently throughout his career. He's just had some struggles getting treated as a proper workhorse for an NFL team. So the question is, do some of the Bruce Arians doghouse, you fumbled, you bobble a check down from Tom Brady in the red zone, you get pulled, are those things going to stick around for Ronald Jones? Because right now he's going at RB 41, just like Allen Lazard at wide receiver 41 on Underdog right now.
Yeah, I'm in on Rojo. I think at value, he's a great pick. He's a great guy to get maybe as your RB4 on your roster. Maybe he has some fill-in on bye week upside. He has tremendous upside if he does end up taking over that role. We talked earlier about all the offseason news blurbs that come out. There was one that came out today that's like Ronald Jones has a legitimate shot to be the clear number 1 back in this offense and the starter. And it's just like, we both are fading Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's talent, but this backfield's also so crowded and there's so many names there that it makes you wonder just how much of a rotation they're going to use. I mean, even last season, they're using Jerick McKinnon, they're using Derek Gore, they're using Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, Darrell Williams. Like, they're using just whoever's healthy and whoever has a pulse on the field at the running back spot. And a lot of times, some of these inferior players had tremendous success. We've seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who doesn't profile as a back that runs it well between the tackles, doesn't profile as a goal line back, a short yardage back, have some spurts of decent runs here and there, but we've really seen him struggle in a lot of those situations. So I think Ronald Jones can come in with his skill set from Tampa Bay. He is a great runner. You said it. He's a pure rusher. He had that big season in 2020 where he had over 5 yards per carry. Would have gone over 1,000 yards with Leonard Fournette there if he hadn't got hurt.
RB21 in fantasy points per game.
He had a
so
very strong stretch
RB2
that season, like a 4 or 5 week stretch where he was like the RB3 during the middle of that season. So he's profiled as this guy who can be an 100-yard rusher, rush for over 5 yards per carry. He can score around the goal line. You know, the Bruce Arians doghouse days, you said it. I'm hoping those are over and that he can really fill this role on this offense. I think the pass catching work still probably isn't going to happen. Jerick McKinnon is there to do some of that. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire will continue to do some of that. But even without that, I think Ronald Jones on a high-powered offense could end up as a guy that rushes for 750 to 1,000 yards, and maybe he goes for 8 to 10 touchdowns as well. And if he does that, he is going to significantly outperform this ADP. And I think there's going to be a couple of big games sprinkled within that as well, just because this Chiefs offense is so high-powered. And when you look at the names there, yes, it's crowded, but it's still Derek Gore. It's still Jerick McKinnon. It's Isaiah Pacheco or whatever the heck his name is. That's a rookie. It's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's Jerrion Ealy. Like just a bunch of no-names in Kansas City. Sure, they're all going to come in and do their best to fight for some of these snaps. But Ronald Jones, there's no reason he shouldn't be a significant piece of this offense in 2022, especially when you look at some of the needs that they have at the receiver position. Who knows, maybe that lends itself to a bigger ground game because they were right in the middle of the pack last season in terms of rushing yards per game.
So could we just answer this question yes or no? Can Ronald Jones take the Darrell Williams role from last year in Kansas City this year?
No, because
really,
Darrell, I think if anything, Clyde Edwards-Helaire would transition to that role and Ronald Jones would transition to the role that we were seeing Clyde Edwards-Helaire get, that we were seeing Derek Gore get, because Darrell Williams had, I want to say he had close to 50 targets last season. Like Darrell Williams finished as an RB2. Yep. And I don't think Ronald Jones is going to do that from a pass catching perspective, but I think the signing allows the Chiefs to finally flex CEH out to do what he's naturally best at. And hopefully it allows Ronald Jones to be that guy between the tackles. We saw Derek Gore have big games. We saw Derek Gore have these big breakaway runs and touchdowns and things like that. And I think that's all going to go to Ronald Jones. We saw Derek Gore have a 66-yard, 1-touchdown game. We saw him have a 48-yard, 1-touchdown game, 12 carries for 43 yards. Like Derek Gore, 27-year-old Derek Gore was having success in this offense. So you replace him with someone who's actually a top-tier running talent in the NFL. And I think it's going to be, honestly, probably better for the Chiefs than it will be in fantasy, but there will be some residual success for Rojo as well. And at value, you just can't beat it.
And he has that, I think, standalone potential to get goal line work. That's something we've seen CEH struggle with. So the red zone work and carries on the ground. Could Rojo be a 14 to 18 carry a game, 1.2 target per game type guy? I think so, which does give him standalone value in deep leagues as a depth play where you're getting him right now in that 8th round, sometimes even the 9th round. I think is fine value, especially if you're playing the hero RB game and your RB2 is just some guys that you're going to flex in week to week based on matchup, guys who get hurt in front of them, that sort of thing. I have to fade CEH because I think the only thing you can hang your head on with him is the first-round draft capital. And that's the saving grace. It could be the reason why the Chiefs are going to try again and again and again to try to make CEH work at the start of every season and then slowly phase him out for players who are performing more because he does have that first-round draft capital. The thing that bothers me with Clyde is that his snap share dropped. 58% snaps as a rookie, 51%. I know he had some games where he was banged up, suffered the MCL sprain in week 5, landed on IR, missed 5 games. So he was hurt, okay? But he was on pace to be the RB29. But before the injury, he hadn't had a pop game yet. So the concern for me with CEH is he stuck at that RB29 spot where even when we saw him healthy, he didn't have any pop games. It was 10 points, 12 points, 13 points, 8 points, 11 points again. So is there a path to getting more snaps? Is there a path for him to get that passing game role? That's for each one of us to kind of pick your poison. Do you think CEH can develop a passing game role? based on the fact that they brought Jerick McKinnon back and they signed some of these rookies who profile as pass-catching running backs, I'm erring on the side of no. The Chiefs do not believe that CEH can be their pass catcher, and he's just going to be a grinder, fighting for snaps with Rojo. So that's my take, and that's why I feel extremely confident taking Rojo at this RB41 ADP.
Yeah, we talked about CEH a little while ago on one of our Dynasty shows, and I was more bullish on CEH in redraft. That was before the signing of Jerick McKinnon, and it feels silly to say, hey, them signing Jerick McKinnon back to this offense makes me worried about CEH. It's like, if that worries you, then you had to be out on CEH in the first place. But honestly, at that time, Darrell Williams was gone. It was like Rojo's going to be this rushing role, and really CEH, it was a clear path to him getting that pass catching, more of that Darrell Williams role. And honestly, Jerick McKinnon had so much success for the Chiefs just coming in as this gadget change of pace running back, this third down back at the end of the season in the playoffs. That does concern me, because does that take CEH's receiving upside from 60 or 70 targets down to 40 targets? Because if it does, that is a huge hit to his upside. And I think you're right. CEH, you're probably getting these steady, inconsistent performances, but with the touchdown upside not there either, definitely is some cause for concern in Kansas City. And I would definitely take Rojo at his current ADP than CEH at his ADP several rounds earlier.
So last topic for today's show. If you like what we do here on the channel, like and a sub, greatly appreciated. If you have players you want us to break down, hit us up in the comments down below. Keep an eye on those. Let's talk about the mindset and some players that we like as these late round receivers in drafts right now. Guys that can be your wide receiver 4, 5, or 6. They're sitting outside the top 50 in underdog ADP at the wide receiver position. And Alex, if you look at the names that we have on our show sheet, there is a clear thread that defines all these guys, which is they are the wide receiver 3 on a high-flying offense with competent quarterback play and efficiency. And so the names, I'm just going to read them off. Tyler Boyd, wide receiver 3 in Cincinnati. Tim Patrick, wide receiver 3 in Denver. Josh Palmer, wide receiver 3 on the LA Chargers. KJ Osborne, that's your boy. You've sold me on Osborne lately. I want to say it's Amir Smith-Marset because I liked him coming out, but KJ Osborne put up numbers last year. He was a flex in deep leagues and was a DFS, DraftKings FanDuel god, winning people a lot of money. So
he was almost a wide receiver 3. In some formats, he was standard. He snuck into that low end wide receiver 3. PPR was a high end wide receiver 4 and had some pop weeks. He's interesting.
Thielen's getting older. God forbid something happens to Jay Jets. KJ Osborne could be set to go nuclear. And then we have Van Jefferson, wide receiver 3 for the LA Rams, and James Washington, who will be fighting with Jalen Tolbert, a couple other guys as the wide receiver 3. Dare I say even the wide receiver 2. Ooh. Some little spice in there in Dallas, at least until Michael Gallup comes back. There are 2 guys I have on my list who I just can't seem to let go, and they're dirt cheap right now. Like literally just dart throws in rounds 14, 15, 16. Curtis Samuel and Paris Campbell, guys that have dealt with injury, are on tougher offenses, but we have seen pop games, pop seasons from them at time. In the case of Curtis Samuel, he has had a 100-target season. Paris Campbell, every time he's on the field, we're like, here we go, get ready, it's going to happen. And then the injury starts. So these are guys that you can just throw a dart on. If Paris Campbell gets hurt, if Curtis Samuel is still dealing with the hamstring, drop him at the end of your roster and just keep that spot churning. But Alex, who are some guys that you've kind of headlined off of this list? And are there any others you would add in or even remove?
Yeah, I mean, there's some I want to go into in depth, thinking about other names that I like. This is kind of just off the cuff. I mean, this one's pretty deep. I like Nico Collins a lot. You and I were talking about him a little bit before the show. He had some flashes last year, had some games where he was fairly heavily targeted, and there's a lot of hype around Davis Mills right now. So if people really think Davis Mills is going to step up in year 2, there's a clear path for Nico Collins to do that as well. Had a game against Seattle last season, 10 targets, 5 for 69 in that game. From week 14 through the end of the season, had 4 or more targets, 2 or more receptions in each of those games. And for a late round rookie, like that's all you're looking for. You're looking for him to gain some momentum, gain some strides there at the end of the year. So Nico Collins is a super deep name I really like. You can probably get him in the last round of your draft. I know they drafted John Mechie. I know they're bringing back Brandon Cooks. But Mechie's coming off an ACL. He's going to be a rookie. There's already that rapport there with Nico and Mills. So I think Collins could be a fun name this season. I threw this one out there. This one I don't advise, but this one's like keep an eye on him on the waiver wire, is Velus Jones. Who knows? He's one of these gadget rookies that might have a couple pop weeks, probably going to be nothing, but could have a path to relevance in Chicago because there's just a wide open depth chart there. I think another one, you mentioned Josh Palmer. I'm going to bring up Jalen Guyton, a guy who has had that field stretcher potential in LA. I definitely like Palmer more, but Guyton is another super deep dart there. Now, obviously, some of these names I'm throwing out there are in a different tier. They're in a whole different category than your Tyler Boyds, than your Tim Patricks, than your KJ Osbornes. But there's just a lot of fun names at the receiver spot. And one last one, and this is one that I would actually put a premium on, is Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers is being slept. You've been way higher than me on Jacoby Myers for a long time, especially in Dynasty. But as these best ball drafts are happening, I'm seeing where his ADP is. I'm getting him in like the 10th or 11th round consistently. And Jacoby Myers is going to be the number one wide receiver for the New England Patriots. Jacoby Myers easily could be a top 24.
Only going 3 spots ahead of Devontae Parker in ADP right now on Underdog.
It's ridiculous. Jacoby Myers is the one that I'm big on. I think he's my highest exposure wide receiver on Underdog right now. You look at what he did last season with a rookie quarterback in New England on a run-first offense that was protecting Mac Jones, keeping the volume super low. Jacoby Myers had 83 receptions for 866 yards. Only the 2 touchdowns, which is disappointing. That's been his Achilles heel as a pro. But I think that's more fluky than Jacoby Myers really can't score touchdowns. So if you see that 83 for 866, they bring in Tyquan Thornton, they bring in Devontae Parker. I don't think that changes Jacoby Myers' role at all. And I think Mac Jones is really going to elevate as a passer this season. He's going to have more volume in New England. We see their division getting better with the Dolphins adding pieces. So hopefully they're in more shootout games. They have to get the passing volume up. And I would not be surprised if Jacoby Myers stays healthy, if he puts up a season of 100 receptions for around 1,000 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns. And if you want to know what that translates to in a full season, Jalen Waddle last year, 104 receptions, 1,015 yards, and 6 touchdowns, was the PPR wide receiver 13. That is the ceiling, I think, for Jacoby Myers, finishing as a high-end wide receiver 2. And at worst, I think you're getting a solid wide receiver 3 that you can flex and really rely on week in and week out.
Yeah, Jacoby's another good one. Doesn't profile as necessarily fitting into that offense, but the competition, it's Devontae Parker and a bunch of tight ends. Shout out to Kendrick Bourne. We got a lot of Kendrick Bourne truthers in our Discord, but he's more of a best ball name. Maybe you throw a dart, throw at him super, super late when you just want some crazy stretch Z. But the names that we just talked about, right? These wide receiver 3s on great offenses or these wide receiver 1s on poor offenses are the ones you should be taking other than, rookies that you want to throw a dart throw on. Don't spend this draft capital on Mecole Hardman or Devontae Parker or like DJ Chark, Corey Davis, Robbie Anderson. Fade those names. Go with the guys that we're talking about. Go with a Paris Campbell or Curtis Samuel that, if healthy, can produce. Nico Collins, who could be the one on a bad team. And if we're talking about rookies, there's a ton to get excited about. We were just talking about David Bell, who it's Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Donovan Peoples-Jones. There's a path here for a guy who was an early declare, just got drafted in the 3rd round for Cleveland. I know it's Cleveland. I know it's Jacoby Brissett, but Donovan Peoples-Jones going almost outside the top 100. So he's a guy that I love just throwing my last 1 or 2 picks out on him to see if David Bell can take that step. Don't go after Terrace Marshall. Don't go after Laviska Shenault. Don't go after A.J. Green.
Guys, along with the Velus Jones and the Jalen Guyton, just wait until they pop. Don't waste a draft spot on them. For sure. And some other rookies, Christian Watson. I know we're Lazard guys, but Watson, there is a time and a place for him to be taken right now going as the wide receiver 53. I'd probably wait a little bit on that, but I'm willing to take that dart throw depending on my roster. He's going right now right next to Tim Patrick, and I'm smashing Tim Patrick all day, every day over Christian Watson. But Alex, that's it for today's show. I'm just so stoked for redraft season. It feels like it's finally here. It's settled in now that it's time. It's time for these drafts. Draft dates are getting set. If you like what we do here on the show, guys, a like and a sub greatly appreciated. If you want to keep the conversation going with us, hop into leagues with us, hop into mock drafts with us to get a feel for these ADPs. We'll be breaking some of those down on the show. Did that last week. Hit that free Discord link in the description down below.
We'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Peace.